This is the I Heart My Life show. Welcome to the I Heart My Life show. So happy to have you here, everyone who's listening and watching. Today, we have Corey Lyon Folsom, who's an NLP practitioner, relationship coach, and the author of the incredible book called Soul Statements. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Emily. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited to dive into this incredible topic of empathy and communication and all of your work in relationships. And first, I want to dive into a little bit about your backstory because I feel like you have a super fascinating story, multifaceted. I know that some of your previous life experience has played a part in the work that you do today. So, can you share a little bit about that with us?
So I grew up on the little town on the coast of Maine. It was a great place to grow up. I had a wonderful family, mom, dad, little sister, and we just did America. I was an Eagle Scout. We went to church on Sundays, and nothing wrong with any of that. Although I didn't really learn decent communication skills. Nobody yelled at each other, but at the same time, nobody got into any deep subjects either. And so when I went out into the world and had relationships and work relationships, I just didn't know how to handle conflict, or not even that. I didn't even know how to speak up for maybe what I wanted. And so I just kind of shrunk my exuberance and my certainty. And I went along with other people's programs, which sometimes is great and sometimes not so great. And so as time went on, I also wondered why life wasn't responding with awesomeness to me, because I was such a good guy. And eventually I realized life doesn't respond so much to what we want as how we show up. It responds to presence and alignment. And so at some point, slightly embarrassed to say how many years later, but at some point, I had to decide to get better. And so I started going to personal development workshops. I hired a love and relationship coach who helped me a ton. And what really made the difference was being honest to myself on the inside of why I didn't speak up, why I didn't do that thing, or why I said this or why I didn't say that. And so that internal honesty was a game changer. And so as I told the truth to myself on the inside, my life improved. The world, if you will, took notice, and I was more self-directed. I spent more time intentionally in stillness, connecting to Corey. And so then once I found Corey, the job became to keep him.
I love that. And so when you were having those honest conversations with yourself, what was the awareness that you came to around why you hadn't been communicating or why you hadn't been showing up truthfully?
I realized that I was basing my life on avoiding embarrassment, and I would do anything to not be embarrassed. I was a pretty shy person as a kid, and I didn't really grow out of that as an adult until it got to the point where we're just talking about. And I'm like, you know what? I gave myself permission to be a little more messy, a little more, this is what I would like. How does that land with you versus what do you want?
So you found yourself people pleasing a lot. So how did that translate into avoiding embarrassment? Like what is a scenario that you could have pictured, being embarrassed that you avoided?
Well, say I forgot something important, I would maybe avoid whoever was affected to not have to own up to it. Or I would not kind of catch myself or out myself for just not being present in some way or not keeping my commitments to other people or myself. And so I would just, let's sweep that under the rug and move on.
And do you feel like that was learned behavior from your childhood?
Yeah. When I or my sister had emotions, it was redirect, redirect, redirect. Here's something to be cheerful about versus just being with it. And so we basically got the message, not okay. It's not okay to have any feeling or expression other than I'm good and I'm cheerful.
Yeah. I know a lot of people listening can resonate with that for sure. So at what point did your incredible book, Soul Statements, come into the picture, and what was the inspiration for writing it?
If in my high school yearbook, if there had been a category for least likely person to become a love and relationship coach, I would have taken that prize for sure. And so, yes, I had a lot of relational hardship, and I also learned how to stand up and move through it and not repeat the same things over and over. And so I had a lot of amazing teachers, a lot of inspiration, a lot of great modeling. And so people started asking me for relationship advice. And so it eventually grew to a coaching practice. And what I discovered was helping people notice in the moment what they're telling themselves on the inside, and then say, well, you know what, I can actually choose to think something different. And so it became a practice of reminding oneself of who you really are when you're in distress or hopelessness. It was so helpful for my clients that I thought, oh, I should write a blog about this. I realized there was so much more that it became a book, because it's about turning that voice in your head into an ally and accessing your core value and having that inner alignment in the moments where it matters most. And so it's upgrading your internal conversations. And so it became a book, Soul Statements, a love coach's guide to successful communication. And it's based on the premise that answers are in your center and that you can call up the best part of you in a moment. That's how it'll happen.
So beautiful. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? So, what would be some of the tangible steps that someone would take to call that forth within the moment, even if it's a moment of fear, distress, whatever it may
Yeah.
be?
So, first of all, I'm a big fan of stillness, spending some time just being quiet, contemplation. I love just sitting in nature and just observing the natural world, feeling part of it and connected. And so, for some people, that's a hard workout. For some people, that's writing in their journal. So, whatever connects you to you. And so, when you're connected to you, you can think about, what I'm made of. And so, a soul statement might be, I have a loving heart, or there is grit inside me. And so now you have that realization condensed into a statement, if you will. And now you've scripted in advance. You have something like an actual phrase that you can speak to yourself to create emotional coherence when you're thinking something that's not in alignment with that, that's contrary to that. And so then that voice in your head, you can say, and this is what I actually say sometimes. I say, oh, that's what I used to think. And what's really true is my soul knows what to do. There is strength in my center. I can trust my deep knowing to guide me. And so it's like an emotional postcard from your center place, reminding you of what's true, what's good, what's resourceful about yourself. So you can counteract that old message that is going around that same rut in your mind and say, oh yeah, I know that's not true anymore. And then your next thought is more naturally a more empowered one, because you've just gotten a reminder of what you're really made of.
I love how you framed it in a different way that I've heard before, because normally we're looking to eradicate those thoughts that we don't want to be there, but you're acknowledging them and even saying, this is what I used to think. And then you replace it with what it is that you desire to think now. And I think that that's so beautiful because it's a gentler way of handling those thoughts versus trying to force them or eradicate them or making ourselves wrong for
That's
them.
right. And we're also not tricking our brain, kind of trying to leapfrog into a future state, like, oh, I'm 5 pounds thinner, or my hair is different, or whatever it is, some desired future. And that's good to do, to emotionally inhabit that. But in the meanwhile, in present time, you can draw upon something that's eternal and unchanging about yourself. And you're like, I'm bigger than that. In other words, I know I have
Hmm.
one client. She has one soul statement that works for her for everything. And in those moments of uncertainty, she says, I got this. And what makes that powerful isn't as much the saying of it out loud, the thinking of it, but really you're connecting to that knowingness that you really do. Your heart really is loving. You are held in loving care by your creator. And so you're affirming what your bones already know. And if you can feel it, and you can feel more grounded into that. And you're centering yourself into what's true about you in real time with truth, then there's no trickery. You're just anchoring to a better version of you, which is the truer version of you versus the catastrophic thinking or the places we all go. One time I heard Tony Robbins say that brains aren't designed to make us happy. They're designed to keep us alive. And to do that, they look for what's wrong. Oh, and he said, and there's always something wrong. And there's always something right. And so what's right is always available is the point I'm trying to make. And so if it's always available, we can choose to focus on that. And the future, meaning the next 2 seconds, can be better.
So good. It's so true. Just like the law of polarity says, there's a back and a front, there's a yes and a no, and there's a something going right and something going wrong simultaneously. And it's our choice what perspective we choose. And the other thing I really love that you pointed out is that sometimes, especially with affirmations and mantras, people find it challenging because they're stating something out loud that they don't yet believe is true. And so you're really reminding us to anchor to something that we at our core know is truth, because then we're going to embody it even more because we already are it. And it doesn't feel like we're lying to ourselves or trying to, stepping into magical thinking and, anchoring to something that's not actually our current reality, which creates, disease in our body. It creates uncertainty. It creates a lack of trust. So I think that's such a beautiful way to illustrate it.
Thank you. You said that beautifully. And it's so true that, our soul has its own wisdom, but we're not always reminding ourselves of that. It's like when I was the previous version of me, and all of a sudden I realized, oh, here's some deep truths. Here's some parts of me that are valuable and worthy of space in the world and all this. I didn't have to pretend to be a new version of me. I just had to stop pretending to be everything that wasn't me. And so it's like a fast track to the truth.
So good. And one of the things that I know I've heard you say before is that your soul statements aren't really affirmations. So, what is the differentiating factor for you?
Well, I think they're a form of affirmation. They're just not affirming a desired experience, emotionally inhabiting a desired experience. They're affirming what's already present in your depth, at your core. They're grounding you into truth in present time. And so it's not
Mm,
something you have to reach for. It's something that's ready down inside.
yeah, thank you. That makes sense. I hope you're enjoying the episode so far. Before we get back to the interview, I wanted to share a little something I think you'll find valuable. If you're looking for more clarity on what you want in life or feel like something is holding you back, I've created a free Dream Life Guide just for you. It's a step-by-step resource to help you get clear on your goals and break through any mindset blocks that might be in the way. You can grab it at iheartmylife.com/guide. And as a bonus, I've also included a private podcast feed to go along with the guide to give you even more value and support. So head over to iheartmylife.com/guide to download it for free. All right, now back to the conversation. So I want to switch gears a little bit and come back to the book. I know one of your other things that you're super passionate about is communication and empathy in particular. So can you speak to us a little bit about that and why empathy is so important when it comes to relationships and within
Mhm.
communication?
Well, first off, Emily, one thing I really love is that successful communication is a learned skill. And so that means we can all learn. And it's within easy reach, in other words, just by making some small shifts. And so you've got your soul statements that allow you to speak more powerfully and informed from your center. You're connected to your essence. And so right there, you're able to be more direct in a kind way. And I'm a big fan of acknowledgement. And this leads right into empathy, where, yes, you want to acknowledge what this other person you're with has just expressed. And because we all want to feel heard. And oftentimes that's one of the main goals of talking about this or that is to be noticed and heard. And, oh, that's important to you. And with acknowledgement, sometimes people get stuck thinking they have to agree. And I can say, I get that this is upsetting to you. well, I don't have to agree. I think they should be upset about it. That doesn't matter. The fact is that if they are upset, that's real. And so I can say, I see you're in distress about this. And I know for me, that takes away half or better of my distress just by somebody acknowledging that. And one of the ways we can do that more easily is by first acknowledging what's going on in our own heart. And so you wouldn't necessarily do this outwardly in some conversation with someone, but if you're with other people, you can virtually put a hand on your heart and say, I notice you're contracted. Or you can just say something to your heart like, oh, I'm sorry, you're feeling wounded right now, or scared, or whatever it may be. And so it's okay and oftentimes useful to just say, I got you. I'll speak up for you. I love you, to your own heart. And that all can happen in a, you know, fraction of a second. If you're practiced, you're like, yeah, I know where to go. I get you. It's okay. And then you're less prone to blurting out something you might regret or that's hurtful to another person if you've acknowledged to your heart, like, I'll take care of you. And then you can then be in a better position to be able to acknowledge somebody else. Because oftentimes in an argument, both people are fighting and arguing and campaigning to be seen and heard and acknowledged. Everybody wants to be the one that receives acknowledgement, and then I'll feel better and then I can offer something. Whereas if you offer it to yourself, then you're taking a shortcut to being more kind, so to speak. And so
Mm.
I call it speed to empathy. So you're offering yourself a little empathy, like, I notice you, I'll protect you. And then you can, speak with more respect to other people. And so some of the things I've been saying are soul statements like, I got you. But another one might be, as my serenity increases, I can hold circumstance more lightly. Or even like I was talking about before, you can remind your heart, what's right about me is always available. And so it's just so quick to just shift into a better state. It doesn't mean you've solved a whole bunch of stuff. You're just a little bit more spacious on the inside to then practice better communication, more kind communication. You've had a little empathy because you gave it to yourself. So now you can offer some empathy.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I think it's so powerful to just not be reliant on your partner, whoever you're in communication with, to give you that empathy. Like you can give it to yourself, just like that whole putting your mask on first analogy. And, how often especially like in heated moments, are we waiting for somebody else to do something that we actually could be doing for ourselves? So I think that's so incredible.
Yeah,
I
and
love it.
a lot of this ends up for me circling back to stillness, that time with just you, and you're getting quiet, and you'll read about the whisper of your spirit. Well, yeah, it is a whisper. So you hear that by being still and quiet, and who you are naturally just wants to bubble up, like percolate to the surface if we have that kind of permission to just not have to do anything or go anywhere, but just, I'm going to be still for a little while and, you know, feel what my body needs and what my spirit might want to whisper. Another one I like is, there's a place inside of me where I can tune out everything that's not me. And so that kind of practice results in clarity. Like, I'm clear about who I am, about what I'm about what I'm up for, what I'm not up for. And I like to say clarity is the new sexy.
Love it. So good. Yeah, and I think it's important to kind of highlight what you're saying here around the stillness piece as well, because you mentioned a few minutes ago that stillness or that practice of reconnecting with yourself is going to look different from person to person. And so, how would somebody explore what works for them in terms of whether it's a walk in nature or exercise or literally just sitting down and being still? How would you know what is most in alignment for you?
I think that probably people do some of this naturally, like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to clear my head, or I'm going to grab my board and hit some waves. And so bringing more intentionality to what you do anyway It's like when I'm working out, like say I have that thing where it's like stairs and it's going down and you're walking up and it's, and sometimes if you're really pushing yourself on an exercise, like I'll actually say inside my head, I'm doing this as an act of love. And so I'm telling my body, I'm not punishing you. I want to feel stronger. And so it's an act of self love. And so just bringing intentionality. And I think it's a beautiful practice to sit somewhere and just, how still can I be? How slow can I go? Can I go even slower? Can I be even more still? And just letting the world be the world. And my job is to be Corey and to connect to, who that is and what that is and why that is more and more deeply. And so I really like free journaling where the goal is to say, write 2 pages, and it doesn't matter what you're writing, just as long as you have 2 pages. And it's somehow links you or gives permission to your subconscious to bubble up. And as you're writing, stream of consciousness, and you just go and go and go. And then later you're like, oh, I wouldn't have thought of that, but look what's here. And so that those can provide some nuggets of wisdom. And as you're doing that kind of thing, you're realizing, oh, that's really important to me. Oh, this is really important to me. Let me design my life to maybe get rid of a couple things that aren't that, so that I can do more things that feed me. What feeds my spirit is a great journal prompt. And that's actually something I put in my book is I have journal prompts like every few pages, here's a question. Why don't you journal the answer to that for you?
And what does your personal daily practice look like?
I I have a little home altar, some beautiful things on it, and I sit there and I say thank you for the day. And I actually just try to quiet. I don't have any movement, so I'm still, but I'm just quieting my mind and I'm just trying to be still. And so I'm like offering my stillness to the great stillness, if you will. And one of the ways that I can access that is I remember another time where I felt really still and aware. And so one thing I like to do is when I'm body surfing, I like to, every once in a while there's a wave that's bigger than the rest and I'll dive under and I'll try to press myself on the sand as that big wave rolls over top. But while I'm down there, I listen and it's so quiet. And to be under the ocean and just feel the intense quiet of that. And so then when I'm sitting at my little place, I remember that great quiet and I'm just feeling that. Or another, there's been places in nature in the mountains where I've felt that same or similar thing. And so one of my soul statements is the contentment of the mountains lives inside me. And so I connect to that feeling of that contentment.
I love that. And obviously, you have your book with a lot of these phrases and statements in it. But do you also write them out? Do you have them somewhere else where you can see them regularly? I'm sure that they're memorized at this point. But for somebody just starting, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I recommend finding one that just works for you, that when you say it and think it and feel it, your cells like vibrate. Yes. Like every cell in your body is like a little lamp that gets lit and goes, yes, that's true. I like that you just said that. And so if something's resonating, if you will, like that, then that's a good one. And so just keep reminding yourself when you're thinking something in contrary to that, and realize that self-care is soul care and that your self-care allows you to be more present. I also like thinking of it like you're filling your emotional well or your spiritual well. I had a girlfriend once who used to use the analogy of the gas tank. And so it just as a shorthand for what you're up for or not up for, she'd say, well, my gas tank is about 2/3 full right now. So I could do that, but not this, that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah,
And so, yeah,
love it.
that's just think of it as just somewhere to fill your emotional well. And then your soul statements will come. And you can also use whatever form of distress is in your mind and think, okay, I'm unhappy right now. What's something true about me that would override that?
Mm. Yeah. I love that. It's so powerful because we can use the past to harm us in the present, or we can use it to inspire us. And we all have specific examples of when we've, thought different things or felt differently or achieved something that currently isn't our reality. And we can look back and also see, are there any, I'm thinking about, if someone isn't financially successful at the moment, but they have had financial success in the past, they could have a statement around making money, like I am an abundant being, or I am good at making money, because that was true at one point. It might not be this second, or I'm sure that you have a better way of describing it, but that's just what
Mhm.
popped into my head, that there's all these scenarios from our past where we have done incredible things or we felt something. Even if it's not the reality now, we can use that to
Right,
inspire
right.
us.
Like the abundance of this world is reflected in me, or I have an inner abundance, or I
Mm,
I'm really, really worthy
mm,
of a beautiful
yeah.
place in this world. And so it just kind of
Hmm.
goes back to like, or if you hear yourself complaining, like I am bigger than any complaint. My
Mm.
my inner knowing is available to me. When I trust love, I can handle whatever happens.
Yeah. And that comes back to what you were saying at the beginning, where we get what we are. And so if you're speaking those beautiful soul statements, then obviously we're going to radiate very different energy and show up very differently to the previous ways of thinking and
That's
being.
right. And I think I just was thinking about that self honesty piece too. You know, we can practice our self empathy, we can offer more empathy and acknowledgement to others. And one of the things we want to do in relationship is understand our impact on other people. And so that's a form of self honesty, is to admit that. And so when you're in an argument with someone that's important to you, you might have that realization that, oh, I know what I did. I know what my motivation was. I'm a good person. I had a good motivation. However, it didn't land very well on the other person. And so there's empathy and there's also impact. And so the other person's, the expert on your impact. You're not. You're the expert on your motivation. So if my partner is distressed about something, if it has to do with me, I look at that as need to know information, because I want this person to feel like she made a good choice by being willing to hang out with me. And so she wasn't, drafted for the position. It's a volunteer situation. So I'm interested in understanding this person, and I see my actions reflected with her.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Well, we're going to link all of your information below, where people can find the book, your social media, your website. Is there anything else that you want to share, leave people with in terms of practical tips so they could implement right away?
Well, I came across something I really liked recently, actually, which is the hero and the coward initially feel the same thing. And so I'm like, oh, yeah. So what makes the difference between a hero and a coward is what they do next. And so I would say the next right action is more obvious and natural when you're connected to what you value and to your own value. And so, as I said before, you can learn to call up the best part of you in a moment, and you can learn to be brave, pay attention to your impact, and life will be better.
Yeah, so good. And the final question I have that we ask all of our guests is, what is one way that people can create a life that's better than their dreams?
By being honest on the inside, by realizing that your power is connected to your fearlessness. And so, the more you can give yourself permission to maybe not say or do something perfectly, but give yourself a little permission to be awkward or messy, as long as your heart's in the right place, and just go forward, realizing that everything works out and the world responds to your alignment. So fill your emotional well, get aligned, and go forth.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm super grateful for you, Corey, and for doing this work in the world. So thank you for being here today on the I Heart My Life show.
Thanks, Emily. This was great.
Thank you for listening to the I Heart My Life show. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with 3 friends or post about it on social media using the hashtag I Heart My Life show. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. It really does help us spread the movement far and wide. Remember, everything you desire is possible. Keep believing in your dreams and taking action.